All right, tonight the polls just closed in Georgia as Trump could seal the nomination officially, plus Democrats struggle to decide which is worse for Biden, be senile or corrupt. Let's check it out. All right, welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. We begin with some breaking news. Trump could officially clinch the GOP nomination tonight. 6 states are voting, 4 of them with GOP primaries. The polls are closing right now in the state of Georgia. Newsmax can immediately project that Joe Biden will win the state of Georgia, and also that Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee for the Democrat nomination for president for 2024. That doesn't surprise you. It might take a few more minutes to actually get a Georgia projection for Trump, but the polling has looked very good for him in that state, and obviously Nikki Haley has dropped out at this point. We want to bring in former Georgia State Rep Vernon Jones to talk a little bit about the state of Georgia tonight as we await what could be a very big night. Vernon, good to see you, sir. Our decision desk could call it at any time, but there were some dark days for Trump in Georgia after the 2020 election, we remember. But he has won the state back. A Morning Consult poll before Haley dropped out from about a month ago had Trump up 66 points in Georgia. The RCP average has him up 6 over Biden. I want to ask you, just to start, how did he turn your state around?
Well, first of all, when you look at what happened after 2020, many things that Trump said was true. But after
Vernon, I apologize real quick. We can project now. Former President Trump has won the state of Georgia. Before I let you go, it took about a minute and a half. Trump projected as the winner of the state of Georgia. But go ahead, continue on how he turned the state around.
I was just going to project that. You beat me to the projection. But anyhow, but President Trump was demonized by the media. He was demonized by the DOJ, the FBI, and others. And so having been tormented that much, it actually shaped people's opinion. But when the dust settled and when everything just fell apart that they were accusing this president of, and the facts came out, and we saw the political persecution and prosecution, right, when you saw how people are now able to compare Trump's administration with Biden's administration and how they were far better off 4 years ago than they are now, people start to realize, wait a minute, they paint him as the boogeyman. He wasn't the boogeyman. Joe Biden, in fact, is the boogeyman. He's the one that's hurting us, not Donald Trump. And so Georgians are ready to go back and vote for Donald Trump. Well,
it took about 90 seconds for Trump to take the state of Georgia, and that's one of the fastest we have seen yet. So that means that the numbers, again, he was up something like 66 points over Haley, and that was before Haley dropped out of this thing. So Georgia was quick. Mississippi is next at 8 o'clock. We're going to follow this all night long here on Newsmax. Vernon Jones, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, of course, we're going to follow all that. Our other top story tonight, though, is a rough day for Joe Biden and election-manic Democrats as Special Counsel Robert Hur testified under oath. Now, what we saw today was both parties very angry at the Special Counsel, grilling him for several hours after Hur gave Joe Biden a pass for clearly criminal behavior with classified documents, but at the same time used a very politically damaging reason for Biden as to why he did so, leaving the Democrat Party in the ultimate catch-22. Is it better for their nominee, for Joe Biden, to be viewed as capable but corrupt in 2024, or senile but innocent? Biden's rage over Robert Hur's depiction of him was clear when he spoke to the media the night that Hur's report was initially released. Remember this?
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
Biting the hand that feeds him is what he's doing, pretending not to realize that Robert Hur and the DOJ are clearly on his side in this case. Compare Trump and Biden, after all. Hur referring to this moment from late last year and the big Biden interview he had. Biden saying, what month did Bo die? Oh, God, May 30th. And then Miss Cotton says 2015. Another male says 2015. Biden goes, was it 2015 he had died? Unidentified male speaker says it was May of 2015, and Biden then finally says, okay, it was 2015. Now, further down, Biden claims he couldn't remember what year Trump was elected. which was also his last year as vice president. President Biden, and what's happened in the meantime is that as Trump gets elected in November of 2017, the Mail speaker says 2016. 16. All right, so why do I have 2017 here? So the president appears to have exploited his old age and memory issues to avoid culpability for criminal behavior. That's at least how it appears to me. Here's Robert Hur explaining how Joe Biden responded when he was questioned about an audio recording of himself telling his ghostwriter for a book he was paid $8 million that he had found a bunch of classified documents in his basement. Take a listen to this.
We interviewed the president and asked him about his recorded statement. Quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote. He told us that he didn't remember saying that to his ghostwriter. He also said he didn't remember finding any classified material in his home after his vice presidency. And he didn't remember anything about how classified documents about Afghanistan made their way into his garage. My assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary and accurate and fair. Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe.
So we all know that Joe Biden has some senility issues here, but what he did to basically pull this off was to really play them up when Robert Hur put him into a corner. And this is how Hur established the narrative that Joe Biden was simply too senile to charge. Hur's excuse for saving the hide of establishment Joe, obviously. Apparently you can now rob a bank and pretend you don't remember doing it, and the DOJ is not going to charge you. I guess that's the new rules. It seems pretty clear a very nervous Joe Biden really played it up. I can't remember anything. I don't remember a single thing. That was his way of avoiding trouble in a very tense moment. He's got the DOJ on him, and he's obviously had classified documents for decades that he stole from a secure location. Play dumb. Joe Biden's always been a liar. Why would that change now? Less than 2 years later, Biden shamed Trump in front of the national media for being so irresponsible with his own classified material. Remember this?
When you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself, looking at that image?
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible.
Now, just to show you how phony this guy is, at the moment he gave that interview, Joe Biden was in the midst of dealing with the archives and the DOJ over his own classified document disaster. When he said that, he had his own disaster of the same making going on. Of course, it hadn't been made public yet. The DOJ waited till after the midterms to protect the Democrat Party. Like a week later, they announced this, just to show how disingenuous the president can be a moment like that. Democrats spent much of the day comparing the Biden classified case with Trump's, which ended up being a really dumb move because the cases are pretty much identical. We have watched over the last several months as a very desperate DOJ kept moving the line, which can't be crossed in regards to behavior with classified documents. They kept moving it because Joe Biden's story kept getting worse. His lies kept getting found out, and then they had to move the line of the story, and so the line that you can't cross to get charged had to move with it. Whatever Trump did that Joe Biden didn't do was, of course, going to be the line for the DOJ. Today, Democrats tried to create what is actually a false narrative in all truth, that Joe Biden may have stolen documents from a secure location, which is actually worse than what Trump has done, but at least Joe Biden didn't obstruct the process of giving them back. Listen to Jerry Nadler.
While simultaneously managing the first hours of the crisis in Israel, President Biden volunteered to sit through a 5-hour interview with the special counsel.
The report establishes that President Biden offered complete and unhesitating cooperation with the special counsel's investigation. The Justice Department and the National Archives were proactively notified of the classified documents, and they were turned over.
Yes, now you can steal classified information. You can share it with your ghostwriter while he puts together a book that's going to make you $8 million. You just can't obstruct the investigation when you get caught. Except It appears that's exactly what Joe Biden and company did. Robert Hur says Joe Biden's ghostwriter for his $8 million book tried to destroy recorded evidence of Joe Biden discussing his classified documents and finding those classified documents. Watch this moment with Jim Jordan.
What did that ghostwriter do with the information Joe Biden shared with him on his laptop? What did he do after you were named special counsel?
Chairman, if you're referring to the audio recordings that Mr. Zwanitzer created of his conversations with
Exactly
Mr. Biden,
what I'm referring to.
He slid, if I remember correctly, he slid those files into his recycle bin on his computer.
Tried to destroy the evidence, didn't he?
Correct.
The very guy who was helping Joe Biden get the $8 million, Joe Biden had used the motive for Joe Biden to disclose classified information, to retain classified information, which he definitely knew was against the law. When you get named special counsel, what's that guy do? He destroys the evidence.
That guts a lot of the narrative that we've been seeing from Biden's party and from the media. Robert Hur is named special counsel, and suddenly Joe Biden's ghostwriter is destroying evidence of the things that Joe Biden told him about classified information. Do you really think that the ghostwriter did that on his own? Or did a member of Joe Biden's staff make a phone call and say, you need to get rid of that? Flat out evidence of obstruction. The one thing they thought Trump did that Biden didn't do, because remember, that had to be the line. Oops. And it doesn't end there. Today, James Comer highlighted a massive timeline discrepancy that multiple members of Biden's staff were moving his documents around, furiously going after them, trying to get them around. A lot of low-level people handling boxes of documents long before the surprising discovery of Biden's documents at 7 different locations, by the way, long before they announced that to the National Archives. Here's James Comer.
President Biden's attorneys claimed to have first discovered classified material at Penn Biden Center on November 2nd, 2022. However, President Biden and his lawyers kept it secret from the American people before the midterm elections. The real timeline began in the spring of 2021, not November 2022, as the White House claimed. Additionally, the classified documents were not kept in a locked closet, as asserted by the White House. We've also learned that 5 White House employees and a Department of Defense employee were involved in the early stages of coordinating the organizing, moving, and removing of boxes that were later found to contain classified materials.
So at this point, I think you could argue that Biden's case is now probably far worse than Trump's. Biden's low-level staffers moving documents around, Biden's ghostwriter deleting evidence of the president sharing classified information with him, the obstruction of that, also the sharing of the information. The fact that Jack Smith's classified documents case still exists, that prosecution still exists, when Robert Hur did this today, is proof just how low our current DOJ is willing to go. Brett Tolman is a former U.S. attorney and legal expert, and he joins us tonight. And so it's good to have you back on. How can the case possibly continue against Trump after what we saw today?
You know, let's also not forget that Joe Biden took classified documents when he was a senator. And Rob, for him to be able to do that, it's very different than the documents he got in the White House. He had to be in a SCIF, and that SCIF is in the Capitol. You have to go through 2 security portals. You have to go up an elevator and then through a secure door. And then you would have to access those documents and somehow secrete them out of that SCIF in order to maintain them in your private residence, which he did. So this is a pattern with Joe Biden. His obstruction is real. The allegations against Donald Trump that he obstructed are belied by the fact that he told his lawyers and they communicated to DOJ they could have all access they wanted to all the documents, and they were in one location, a very secure location. The contrast is shocking, but when you think about DOJ right now, you walk away knowing that they are violating their own internal policies in order to do what they're doing, protecting Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, this feels to you like a very slipshod investigation from the DOJ, the special counsel?
I have 2 cases right now that I'm defending individuals who are accused of having illegal classified documents. Their cases are far less egregious It is unbelievable that DOJ is not only prosecuting Trump, but many other people for possession of classified documents. When the president, now Joe Biden, took these, he was a civilian. He had them illegally. He used them in an illegal manner to profit off of the information. And we also heard something today that not a lot are focused on, that Hur concluded in his investigation that what he had and what he had conveyed to a third party that was classified actually did impact national security.
Actually did impact national security. And just the weight of that, if you could, real quick.
And what it means is this is the case the Espionage Act was created for.
Yes.
Was for the individual that is willing to take and maintain and hold classified documents and then use it for their own personal gain and against the interest of the United States. This is a classic case. It doesn't matter whether he's got a bad memory or not. DOJ, there was a time, Rob, they never would have analyzed what a jury would perceive in the defendant. Instead, the blindfold would remain on Lady Justice, and they would go forward and prove their case.
That's shocking. Unbelievable. Brett Tolman, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Corey Lewandowski is a Trump 2024 surrogate and joins me now. Corey, the DOJ and the media say Trump deserves prison because he didn't give the documents back right away. Here's the latest Trump whistleblower on CNN. This is the thing they're all freaking out about now.
Boxes. Oh, yeah, they were the boxes that were in the indictment, the white banker's boxes. That's what I remember loading.
And did you have any idea at the time that there was potentially U.S. national security secrets in those boxes?
No clue. No, I had no clue. I mean, we were just taking them out of the Escalade, piling them up. I remember they were all stacked on top of each other, and then we're lifting them up to the pilots.
They're all excited about that because they think that that's the one thing Trump did that Biden didn't do, and it's all blowing up in their face now.
Which is allegedly that Donald Trump moved these documents to a different location. What we know is Joe Biden kept these documents in an unsecured garage with a son who has been accused of multiple felonies, who we know is a drug addict, who we know has received enormous amounts of money from countries overseas who hate this country and want to do us harm. But that's okay because Joe Biden in his frail state doesn't remember ever finding these classified documents. He knows they were near the Corvette that he loves so dearly, but he claims that they were in a locked garage. We know that Hunter Biden unequivocally had access to that garage. He was living in that garage. The paper trail now shows us unequivocally that Congressman Jim Jordan has showed us, and Comer, that this money has come from foreign entities into the Hunter Biden bank account, disseminated to Joe Biden and his brother. The question is, what did they get for that? We know that Bubba Linsky told us that Joe Biden was the big guy and he was getting 10% of everything Hunter was making. Was it because Hunter was having access to that classified information that Joe Biden not only allowed Hunter to see, but now Special Counsel Hur has admitted, has provided to a ghostwriter? Joe Biden profiteered off of this to the tune of $8 million for a book, which was a complete failure. And so then what does the ghostwriter say? Oh, I deleted the information. That's what he told us.
And he's never charged. He never gets charged for that. He gets off scot-free for obstructing and deleting evidence. I mean, it's just amazing. I want you to watch Adam Schiff today lambasting Robert Hur after all he did for Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. Lambasting him because he had to use some kind of an excuse, and that excuse was, we can't charge Joe Biden because he's too senile. Take a look.
You could have written your report with comments about his specific recollection as to documents or a set of documents, but you chose a general pejorative reference to the president. You understood when you made that decision, didn't you, Mr. Hur, that you would ignite a political firestorm with that language, didn't you?
How ungrateful can you be? They just gave you the greatest gift ever. They needed some way to justify it, and you're going to lambast him for doing that.
Look, little Adam full of Schiff hasn't changed in the last 4 years. He told us it was Russia, Russia, Russia. He saw the evidence was unequivocal. Donald Trump colluded. We know it was all a farce. This guy hasn't changed one iota.
No, he certainly hasn't, and that's a clever one, but that's a dangerous one. I don't think I have the guts to try and say that one on TV. Finally, I want to talk about Laura Trump and Michael Whatley. now running the RNC. Day one, they are cleaning house. We're hearing about mass layoffs. My question to you is, can they make this operation effective in time for November, and what needs to change?
Absolutely. Look, I know Mike Whatley. I've known him for almost 2 decades. He was overseeing the election integrity project, going state to state to make sure that we're going to have integrity at the ballot box come November. So this new leadership is going to bring in a whole set of fresh ideas. Getting rid of those 60 people, guess what? The building isn't going to miss one beat. We're bringing in new people. Chris LaCivita's coming in. You know, Mike Whatley is there. Laura Trump is there. This place is finally going to run the way it's supposed to, which is just support the Republican nominee, in this case, Donald Trump, after tonight, raise money, make sure we've got integrity at the ballot box. If we do that, Donald Trump is sure to win in November.
There you go. That's what it all comes down to. Corey Lewandowski, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I want to go over to our decision desk with John Glasgow and the latest as the polls in Georgia close, and we had Trump right out of the gate get called. Biden gets called. A minute later, Trump gets called. John, go ahead.
This was an early one here, Rob. Polls officially closed in Georgia, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Voters in the Peach State went to the polls today to make their voices heard in the Democrat and Republican presidential primaries. Now, it is early, but President Biden and former President Trump are the projected winners. About 2% of the votes are in. Let's take a look right here. So Newsmax projecting that President Biden is the winner in Georgia. You can see here 96% of the vote. Again, only around 14,000 votes have been tallied so far. Marianne Williamson only around 2%, so not given any much of a competition there towards the current president. Now, that means that he will likely be the Democratic nominee for the convention here in Chicago this summer, pending these results here today. Now, Newsmax also projecting that former President Trump is going to win Georgia as well. Former President Trump started the evening. He's looking to get 1,077 delegates. That's gets him to that magic number of 1,215, which he needs to clinch the GOP nomination. Looking here, he's got 80% of the vote. Nikki Haley pulling in 18%. Again, right now, early indications are we have around 6% of the vote in, so more of this will come out throughout the next hour here, but things are looking to go as we projected, that former President Trump will take it, as well as President Biden on the other side. But let's go right now to Newsmax national correspondent Mike Carter. He's in Sandy Springs, Georgia, at the Fulton County GOP Watch Party. Mike, you said that the voting seemed a little bit light here throughout the day.
Yeah, much lighter today, this time around, John, than it was in 2020. Not a lot of lines in Georgia, but that was to be expected, as neither Biden or Trump were really running with any opposition against them. Former President Trump, the winner in Georgia. Keep in mind, in 2020, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden by less than 1/4 of a percentage point. Since that time, nearly 400,000 people have moved to the Peach State, and we're here with one of them. Robert McNeely, you moved here from Alaska 2 years ago. You're running for the Georgia State House. You're a Republican, but you're running for office here in Georgia. What are you seeing in terms of the shifting electorate here in Georgia? Is this going to benefit the Republicans and Donald Trump, or the Democrats and Joe Biden?
Yes, sir. I think it's going to benefit Donald Trump, and congratulations to President Trump on a big victory tonight. I think it's going back in our direction. Of course, Georgia's very purple, especially compared to what it's been historically. But like me and many other people, we're coming here for a better way of life, to raise our families, to get children better educated, to find better jobs. So Georgia is really a wonderful place to live, and we want to keep it that way.
It certainly sounds like it. 400,000 people moving to Georgia over the last 4 years, guys. We'll have to wait a few months to see how it all pans out. Back to you.
National correspondent Mike Carter there, live from the Fulton County GOP Watch Party in Sandy Springs, Georgia. Thank you. Stick around. We have continuing live coverage as the results come in throughout the night. We will have more after the break.
All right, some bad news for big spending Joe Biden, who's trying to create this image that all of our cost problems are from the private sector and greedy businesses. Inflation is ticking back up, 3.2% over the year prior for the month of February, and month to month, February over January, at 0.4%. If you annualize that, it's almost 5% inflation when you annualize February. That is scary stuff. The official total inflation since Biden took office at 18.6%. I don't buy that. Those numbers feel very soft, likely are soft. You look at the main things that people buy, in some cases, Americans paying 30, 40% more than they used to. Look at gas, energy, airfare, electricity, food, housing, and rent, all way, way up. And this report comes as the president pushes an absolutely massive $7.3 trillion budget for fiscal 2025, and economy-killing tax hikes to fund at least some portion of it. The rest of it, of course, will just be tacked onto our national debt. There is nobody in Washington willing to stop this insanity, it seems. You look at the escalation of government spending brought to you by the pandemic, the Chinese and Tony Fauci gave us. Before COVID in 2019, look at that, $4.5 trillion. You go through COVID, we know why we had to spend a lot of money there for a few years, but look at it now, COVID completely over. 2024, 6.9, and look at 2025 in the 7s. This is what they're doing to us. Renowned economist Art Laffer joins us to talk more about this. And sir, it's good to have you on.
Thank you, Rob.
Just talk about that for a second. What we used to spend in this country pre-COVID as a government versus now. We've almost doubled the spending of government in just a few years.
Yeah, we have, and it's basically not for really productive reasons either. I mean, we're paying people not to work. We're paying people just demogrants so that they feel richer and they quit their jobs. And that's why you have employment down so very, very much. Now, the unemployment rate's down, but that's not really the number you want to look at. You want to look at the employment rate, which is at one of its lowest levels in a long, long, long time since Bill Clinton was president.
Right.
And if you look at it, when you don't have the production of goods and services, Rob, what you find is happening, those goods aren't out there in the marketplace and people bid for the reduced amount of goods and services, and you get the inflation that you've been seeing happening here. And I think your numbers just showed that prices are up since Biden got into office, almost 19%. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
And do you buy that number? I mean, I'm sorry, but I feel like life is 30, 40, 50% more expensive than it was but before we ever knew what COVID was. I mean, it just doesn't feel like 18%.
Well, to some people it won't because it's not. But to some people it probably feels like it's better than that. I think those numbers are pretty solid numbers. I mean, the department, the Office of Business Economics is a pretty solid group of people, of professionals, and they try to keep those consistent over long periods of time. And I think they've done a good job. But what you really have to look at here is people don't buy inflation. People buy goods at prices. And while the inflation rate may be coming down, prices are still rising. Right. Every single day, prices are higher and higher and higher. So what I think the misconnect might be with you is that, you know, we see this inflation number coming way down. Well, prices are not down. Prices are still up, and they're still going up fast, way above the Fed's guidelines. And, you know, this is not changing. Biden has not done anything to price level. It's going higher and higher every day.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about it. It's aggregate. It's year over year. You add them all together. When all of a sudden, when Biden says inflation's down, that doesn't mean prices are going down now.
That's
they're never going to go down. I mean, that would be deflation. Let's talk about the interest on the debt that we have at this point, because that goes hand in hand with the interest rates that I don't think they're going to be able to lower because we have an inflation problem. We are going to spend in fiscal 24 more money just carrying the interest of our debt, than we're going to spend on national defense. $870 billion just to hold that $34 trillion that we have in debt. That is almost $1 trillion of our money that we are just going to flush down the toilet because we can't get a government that can spend within its means.
That's true. I mean, you know, if you borrow like that, you're going to have interest payments to pay on that borrowing. And as you know, those interest payments do mount up. They mount up very quickly. Yeah. And it's especially true as the inflation rate gets lower, those interests become more and more real. And they have much bigger effect on the economy. So it is a scary thing, and it's very hard when you're in debt like that to really dig your way back out again. It would take a number of years of good, solid economics and economic growth to be able to reduce that debt level back to really good, reasonable levels. Yeah. So you've got a real task ahead of you, and every day we don't address it is another day that we really put it off and have more and more damage done because of it.
Yeah, and who's the president that's going to come along and say we have to take our medicine? We have to, we have to bring in $5 trillion and spend $3.5 for several years to get this under control. I mean, who would possibly do that? I mean, that's who wants to take on that political liability. I want to ask you one final thing. The administration. Sure. You know, obviously their game here is to say we have a revenue problem instead of a spending problem, which is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. They're proposing this billionaire tax, 25%, and that would allegedly raise, and this is probably a very high estimate, They're saying it would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. They have a $7 trillion budget for 1 year. How laughable is the idea of $50 billion a year? That's I mean, as if that's going to save anything. That's nothing to them.
Yeah. I want to lecture, if I can, just for a second, if you'll forgive being a professor.
That's fine.
I just finished my book, Taxes Have Consequences, with Gene Sinkfield and Brian Dimitrovic, and we looked at the entire U.S. income tax from 1913 to the present. We have every single tax return, and let me just tell you the facts. Now, not how you feel. It's not wishful thinking. Every time we've raised tax rates on the top 1% of income earners, the economy has underperformed. Tax revenues have come down, and the poor have been hammered. The lowest echelons have been hammered. Every time we lower tax rates on the rich, on the top 1%, revenues from the rich have gone up, the economy has outperformed, and the jobs have been created for the lowest echelons, and they've experienced prosperity relatively. Those are the facts. Now, what could have happened is possible. Anything is possible here, but we have the data. You know, these guys, and I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of hearing their opinions. This is not about opinions. This is not how you feel. We got to talk about facts. If he does what he says he's going to do, it will lead to less revenues and a bigger problem on the deficit and a bigger problem on the economy, period. And the poor will suffer the most. Period. Those are the facts, sir. Just the facts.
So well said. And their rhetoric is exactly the opposite, based on nothing, but that's how they spin it. Always great to hear the brilliant mind of Art Laffer. Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
We appreciate it. All right, a series of hearings on Capitol Hill revealing just how vulnerable this country has become to another terror attack because of the situation we have at the southern border and what the president is doing to us. During a hearing before the Senate Intel Committee, FBI Director Chris Wray confirming some of the most dangerous people on the planet are using our southern border, and many of them are coming in.
I don't know that I can speak to the specific gang, but certainly we have had dangerous individuals enter the United States of a variety of sorts. There is a particular network that has, where some of the overseas facilitators of the smuggling network have ISIS ties that we're very concerned about.
So violent gang members and smugglers connected to ISIS are coming in. Your new neighbors, when you let people with more heart than brains run your country, is the honest truth. Brandon Judd is the head of the National Border Patrol Council. He joins us now along with Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Mark Lamb. Gentlemen, good to have you both on. Brandon, the fact that these warnings keep coming and nothing changes in our government is I mean, could they be any more? I mean, it's terrible. I don't even know a word to describe it better than just awful, terrible leadership from people that hate the country.
Well, I'm really glad that Chris Wray finally came out and said this, but this is 2.5 years too late. He should have gone to Congress 2.5 years ago when we knew that this problem existed, and he should have warned them then. He should have let them know what exactly was going on. He should have let the public know. The public has a right to know and understand what is crossing our borders illegally. We knew that this was happening 2.5 years ago, very shortly into the Biden administration, and we knew that criminals were coming across. We knew that people with ties to terrorist organizations were coming across. We were apprehending them. It was all out there, yet we needed the FBI to go out there and confirm it. And had he have done that 2.5 years ago, there's a good chance that there would have been public outcry and pressure would have been put on the administration. So now we're a short time away from an election, and now he's coming out and saying, and it's very, very disappointing to every single one of us that put on a uniform, that the FBI wasn't out in front of this talking about it up front.
And Sheriff Lamb, I mean, you deal with this border, the dereliction of duty here, the fact that, you know, we get a warning like this, they're not going to change anything. They're going to just leave it open. They don't care.
That's right. You know, and Brandon's right. We've been saying this for 2.5, 3 years. As soon as this administration came, this border situation changed substantially. The graphs will tell you. What we dealt with over 2 decades, and Brandon can corroborate this, was predominantly people from Mexico, people coming in from Guatemala, some of the Central American countries. That bar graph is flipped now. Now we're seeing people coming from a lot of different places, coming from Western Africa, coming from Syria, the Middle East, come from Ukraine, from Russia, from China. That should be alarming to every American. And it's no wonder that the blinking lights are going off all over the place. And I agree with Brandon. The FBI, whether it was asleep at the wheel, whether it was complete dereliction of duty, whether it was they just didn't want to say anything and hopefully the problem would go away, it did not. It got worse and worse. And now we're all dealing with the repercussions of it.
Shocking. I'm used to being shocked about the border, but just another one. Sheriff Lamb, we appreciate it. Brandon Judd, always good to see you, sir.
Good
New Harvard-Harris poll out tonight shows the majority of Americans think Joe Biden's angry political rant that was dubbed the State of the Union last Thursday actually divided the country. 59% hated this speech, and this is a Harvard-Harris poll, while 41% thought that screaming at all of us and targeting the Supreme Court actually unified the nation. 61% say Biden was inadequate on addressing immigration, and a majority also said the delivery of his speech raised questions and concerns about his age and fitness for office. Although I will say he was juiced up last Thursday. I thought he was going to shoot through the roof of the Capitol.
Mark Robinson is not a normal primary winner. He will be the Republican nominee for governor in North Carolina.
Mark, we should note, is black, has a history, though, of derogatory comments about Muslims and members of the LGBTQ community.
This guy hates everybody.
And is it too late to get Herschel Walker back in there? Because he might actually have a better chance.
Okay, on Super Tuesday, the man who former President Trump calls Martin Luther King on steroids, North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, secured his state's GOP gubernatorial nomination. The left, as you just saw, is going nuts over this guy. The avalanche of attacks against him have been piling up in recent days. A sample of Mark Robinson's no BS, very refreshing style has never been seen better than in 2021 when he talked about gender ideology.
Here's something else I'm not supposed to say. Ain't but two genders. Two genders. Ain't nothing but men and women. You can go to the doctor and get cut up. You can go down to the dress shop and get made up. You can go down there and get drugged up. But at the end of the day, you were just a drugged up, dressed up, made up, cut up, man or woman.
Something else right there. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson joins us now. And, sir, it's good to have you on. So tell me this. What is it that you want to do for North Carolina if you're elected governor? What is it you want to do that gets you so attacked by these people?
Well, first off, thank you for having me here. I think what it really terrifies these folks on the left is this. Number one, they're not used to seeing an absolutely unapologetic black conservative who's unwilling to go along with their programs and buy their lunacy. That's number one. Number two, they're terrified of me because they know that we can get elected as governor. There's a great possibility we will get elected as governor. And if we do, we will change voting dynamics in this state for decades to come. And the third reason they despise me is just simply because they despise anyone who stands up and tells the truth, and they despise people who agree with policies that actually work for the people and places that we're elected to serve in.
That's well said. You know, it's the black vote, especially in this election in November, is going to be so interesting to watch because, you know, again, just like you said, they have this control. They've had it for a long time. I mean, we're going all the way back to LBJ when they started working on the black community in this country and basically just hooking them on what I guess you call the dole, you know, and just, you know, keeping them in one place, paying them for the vote, whatever you want to call it. That ideology is so sick and twisted. It is, in a lot of ways, a form of slavery. I think that's an accurate depiction of it. And it's changing, though. I mean, people are waking up to the fact that the Democrat Party does not provide you with anything but chains to a system that hasn't worked for 50, 60 years and is never going to work. And you have the former president who's made huge inroads with the black community after doing so many great things for them while he was the president, the least of which were the opportunity zones, giving massive incentives to people that want to get off the dole, go out there and start a business and get back to and have a more, you know, a better life. Talk about that.
Well, that's just it. All the things that I just mentioned. Look, here in North Carolina, We've got a governor right now that's a perfect example of what you were talking about. He came to our state school board meeting. I'm a member of the state school board as a lieutenant governor, and he came to our state school board meeting and told us that we should put a moratorium on giving vouchers to people for low-income people for private schools. He said that private schools can't be held accountable and that private schools take money away from public schools. And he just gushed on and on and on about the public schools. But here's the kicker. He sends his child to a private school. But he doesn't believe that somebody who's in a failing public school should have the ability to pull their child out and send them to a well-heeled private school. We don't believe that. We believe that people should have the freedom to be in charge of their own lives, whether it be in education, whether it be in healthcare, whether it's politics, no matter what it is. We believe that people should be empowered to make their own decisions. That's how this country was formed. The folks on the other side of the aisle, including my opponent, cut from the same cloth as Joe Biden, the current governor here in North Carolina, and all those leftists who believe that the government should be in control of those things. We don't believe that.
Think of the damage that just the teachers' unions in this country have done to black students over how many years of just terrible education. And there's never, ever been any kind of reform because the unions have stood in the way, and there's better ways to do this, and you can have smarter kids that grow up to be better students and better workers and have more prosperous lives, and it never changes because that union has such control. It's despicable. I want to pivot to college sports here for a second before I let you go. The NCAA, the NAACP sending a letter to the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, this week, urging black student athletes to reconsider attending public universities in the state of Florida after Florida eliminated these very divisive DEI programs. I think a lot of people think it's great. Florida is fighting to end this black victim grift in this country that has done so much damage, that's been perpetuated by the left for all these years. What's your message to the NAACP?
My message to the NAACP would be this. Get on board to end these programs, because let's think about it for a second. Number one, you talk about this DEI, this diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to get rid of that. We need another form of DEI. What we need is discipline, excellence, and intelligence. And when you look at it, when we talk about that in the classroom, they want diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom. They want diversity, equity, and inclusion amongst their staff. But take a look at the basketball team. When it comes to the basketball team, the football team, the baseball team, it's all about discipline, excellence, and intelligence. It's all about whoever's the best, putting that person on the field so we continue to get our dollars in from those sports. This whole thing is a sham. I am proud to see the state of Florida flush this garbage down the toilet, and I hope here in North Carolina we're able to do the exact same thing. Compete on merit, and that's it.
That's exactly right. North Carolina running for governor. Mark Robinson, we appreciate it, sir. Good luck to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. More than 200,000 have signed up for Newsmax Plus. Our free stream has ended for non-cable viewers. Plus, get you all your favorite shows. This one, Eric Bolling, Greg Kelly, all of them. Plus, specials with John Voight, former President Trump. You can sign up today. There is no risk. All right, so let's get back in with John Glasgow at our election desk for the latest updates tonight after Georgia called early. John.
Thanks, Rob. Trump and Biden projected to win Georgia. Here's a look at the results so far. Biden with 96% of the early votes. A win will give him 108 delegates, more than enough to clinch the presidential nomination. Former President Trump picking up more than 80% of the early votes. 59 GOP delegates up for grabs in Georgia. Trump needs more than 130 to clinch the Republican nomination. Trump could do it with wins in Washington State, Mississippi, and Hawaii later tonight. Let's go to national correspondent Mike Carter, live in Fulton County with more. Mike?
Hey, thanks, John. Well, one of the issues this election season, of course, has been illegal immigration. It's an issue that's affected the entire country, but it's really hit home here in Georgia with the murder of Laken Riley to an alleged illegal immigrant. I'm here with the chairman of DeKalb County GOP, Marcy McCarthy. Marcy, look, illegal immigration, huge issue for November. How has it affected Georgia voters?
Well, the murder of Laken Riley has catapulted illegal immigration into the forefront of Georgia. What it has really brought to the forefront is the fact that every town is a border town, and there's not anyone safe from running just to going anywhere, quite frankly. So it has caused a lot of people great concern and brought awareness. We have illegals being trafficked at our airport that are being flown in at all hours of the day and night. So it is here, and we need to fix the problem. I'm really happy to see our General Assembly working very hard and passing some legislation that has been languishing for several years.
There you go. Sorry to interrupt you. One of the men trying to fix that problem, of course, former President Trump. Marcy, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. We'll send it back to you, John.
All right, thanks so much, Newsmax national correspondent Mike Carter. Thank you. Stick around for our continuing election coverage throughout the night. Rob, back to you.
All right, John, thanks so much. Mississippi closing here in about 15 minutes. All right, back to our top story today. Huge day on Capitol Hill as Special Counsel Robert Hur testifies, and Congressman James Comer joins us now after a very busy day on Capitol Hill. We're glad to see you tonight, sir. I just want to start with this. You know, all that we saw today, we know that Joe Biden's ghostwriter, who was working on an $8 million book for Biden, committed obstruction, tried to destroy evidence, was not charged by Robert Hur. You also have evidence that Biden's team lied about when they found, I should say, his documents. And he likely had low-level staffers tampering with boxes long before they reported their finding to the National Archives. You asked Robert Hur about that today. I wanted to get your assessment of what his answer was, because all of this plays into just how on earth they're not charging, or I should say not charging, that he has not recommended charges for Joe Biden.
Right. I mean, this is a perfect example of a two-tier system of justice in America. Hur admitted today that Joe Biden lied numerous times. He lied during his interview. He lied at his press conference after the report was published. We proved that they've lied about the timeline. The discovery of the mishandling of classified documents was at least a year and a half earlier than when the report began and when the White House made the announcement of the discovery. So it's impossible to know who all had access to those classified documents. We asked her questions about who all he interviewed because we know of certain White House employees and others who moved those documents, who had access to those documents, but yet he wouldn't give any specifics about the interviews, and some of them weren't even mentioned in the report. So we want the recordings of all the interviews, and we have questions too, because, Rob, this whole investigation from my standpoint, we've proven the Bidens were influence peddling. We've proven they've taken in $30 million from their influence peddling ring with our adversaries around the world. We need to know if those classified documents were part of the influence peddling schemes that the Bidens committed. And the fact that all we know is, yeah, there were mishandled documents from Ukraine and Russia, two countries where the Biden took in a lot of money. We don't know the specific documents. We need to know that. Hur knew we needed to know that, but you know, he's not.
Hur didn't want to figure this
like
out.
He should.
I mean, you know, there was evidence that this thing looked dirty, and he closed up shop really fast. About a month after we found out that it looked like the timeline was off, all of a sudden the whole thing's over. Because at the end of the day, they needed Biden to do less than they allege Trump has done in this case, because that's the only way that they can still charge Trump. So, but this looks terrible, and I thought it was so ironic to watch all of these bratty Democrats today, like Adam Schiff, yelling at this guy who has done this huge favor for them. I thought that was just so telling, because there's a little political damage to the idea that Joe can't be charged because he's too senile. I mean, wasn't that something?
It was something, and you see the hypocrisy among the Democrats, and you see their obsession of Donald Trump. I mean, if they weren't attacking her for telling the truth, they were attacking Donald Trump. You know, if they could blame Donald Trump for Joe Biden's classified documents being in 5 different locations, they would. They actually tried to do that today. So this is another example, two-tier system of justice. We're not finished with our investigation. We want to know which documents Joe Biden mishandled.
I got about a minute left, but I wanted to get to this. We noticed something very interesting today that's not being talked about in a portion of the transcript that did get a lot of attention. And that is Biden speaking about the time period when his son died in 2015. He said, "I hadn't walked away from the idea that I may run for office again, but if I ran again, I'd be running for president." Biden also, as we know, he promised Beau that he wouldn't leave public life. And he goes on to tell Robert Hur that in this period of time, he's trying to figure out whether or not, when am I going to run for the presidency. Now, this all ties back to the influence peddling and the corruption, because the entire time that Joe Biden was meeting with Hunter's business partners after leaving office, 2017, they're dealing with the Chinese, they're dealing with a lot of nefarious people. We know they dealt with the Russians while he was the vice president. He knew he was likely going to run for president while he was doing a lot of these dealings, corrupt dealings with foreign countries, a lot of nefarious countries, and he knew he was going to run for president, which of course made him a much hotter commodity to foreign countries. If Hunter's going in and saying, my dad's running, like he's almost sure he's running, and he's a shoo-in because he's Obama's boy, and he's just the legacy guy.
That's exactly right. And we've heard testimony from that, from at least one former associate that said that. Look, Joe Biden in the private sector at his age wasn't worth a whole lot to the family influence peddling ring. But if he was going to be president on down the road, then it was an investment. It was an investment for China, an investment for Romania, an investment for Russia, and they invested in the potential of Joe Biden becoming president again and having access. So that's what the Biden influence peddling ring was all about. We've proven that. We want to get specifics for the documents because we're trying to finalize this investigation so we can start holding people accountable.
That's exactly right. That's why I always laugh so hard every time he tries to claim that, oh, it was Charlottesville is why I ran. Like, get out of here, you corrupt old liar. Congressman Comer, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you, sir. Programming note, his colleague Jim Jordan, who we heard from today as well, is going to be on bowling later tonight, just here actually in a few minutes. All right, we continue to follow Joe Scarborough's descent into madness. It's fun to watch. It's next in News from the Left in 2 minutes.
I'm just saying this guy says such random about he's a kindly old man who could not remember his son's birthday.
Welcome back. Time now for News from the Left. First up, Morning Joe melting down yet again, this time attempting to claim that Robert Hur, the man who let Joe Biden off the hook despite evidence of sharing classified information and obstructing justice, well, he's just a Trump surrogate. Take a listen to this one.
I wonder what pasture he will walk off into.
I don't know.
Just kind of wander off and say, well, you know, and Joe Biden, I noticed he didn't really tie his tie well. The tie knot suggested that maybe he has arthritis in his left thumb.
Where are you going with this?
I'm just saying this guy says such random about his
Stop.
I think he hopes he gets a judgeship. If Donald Trump gets elected again, he's trying out because he humiliated himself with that display.
Jackie...
Speaking of humiliating yourself, now he's just cursing on TV. He's getting very desperate with these polls. Next up, a prominent conservative activist in Belgium sentenced to a year in prison for receiving racist memes in a group chat. Yes, this is where we are headed with these people in charge. Today, a court convicting former Flemish parliamentarian Dries van Langenhove to a year in prison over what the judge called racist, hateful, Nazi, and negationist speech. Court also tried 6 other members of the Flemish nationalist youth movement that he leads. 5 received suspended sentences, 2 who work for the Flemish Interest Party, which is actually slated to make gains in Belgium in the upcoming elections in June. Now, the memes are offensive, obviously. We'll show them to you. There they are right there. But think about the road that we're going down and how slippery this slope is. Now, do you imagine that memes saying end whiteness, which you can find anywhere on social media, would get the same punishment, just calling for the extermination of all white people? No. So how's that going to look in a few years as this evolves? Next up, bad news for Rob Reiner. His newest documentary film paints American Christians as nationalists and Republican extremists. Absolutely bombed at the box office. I hope he spent a lot of time working on this. The film, called God and Country, pulling in 38,000 opening weekend, 60,000 worldwide to this date. With ticket prices as high as they are, that means like less than 4,000 people went to see Rob Reiner's new film. Take a look at the trailer, you realize why.
Christian nationalism uses Christianity as a means to an end. That end being some form of authoritarianism.
They're told over and over and over again that you're in danger. You need to fight if you don't want to lose your country.
We are in a civil war between good and evil.
This is not a movement about Christian values. This is about Christian power.
Oh, sorry, Rob. Your film stinks. Go have a cheeseburger. Finally, another example of your taxpayer money gone to waste. A transgender founder of a now defunct LGBTQ nonprofit in Washington, who received a massive amount of cash from the Biden administration, has been arrested on charges of fraud, money laundering, and then fled the country, apparently. DOJ says Ruby Corrado, a biological male who tells people that he's a woman, got over $1.3 million in COVID aid from the Paycheck Protection Program for services and support for the LGBTQ community. Corrado diverted $150,000 of that allegedly to a private bank account in El Salvador and hid everything from the IRS. In 2022, the D.C. Attorney General claimed Corrado funneled more than $400,000 from his nonprofit to his personal account the year before. Oh, Ruby, we found another one. Leaving you on a high note tonight, common sense returning, at least in the UK, announcing today the National Health Service banning puberty blockers for minors all throughout the United Kingdom. This is big. Comes after an independent review found a lack of consensus and open dialogue about gender dysphoria, questioned how medical professionals were responding to it. Study there also found a third of trans youth in the UK experienced a decline in mental health while taking these puberty blockers. Nearly 6,000 kids referred for puberty blockers from 2020 to 2022. Think about how many children that is. As we here in the U.S. are up against this idiotic woke army and watching all of our systems and all our administrations fail because they're so scared to offend anybody, they're battling to ban this practice in Europe. Sweden severely limits access to puberty suppressants and hormones to minors, only in exceptional cases and in research settings, they say. Finland and Norway with similar restrictions. France has called for the great medical caution regarding giving these life-altering drugs to kids. We cannot let this country continue to worship to the LGBTQ flag and lose all common sense. You know something's wrong when the Europeans are more conservative than we are. Polls are closing in 20 seconds in Mississippi, and bowling is next. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Democrats are in another dilemma this election cycle. Well, their first dilemma was how to handle their very unpopular Vice President, Kamala Harris, keep her on the ticket despite her very, very high unpopularity, or let her go and risk alienating the woke wing of their base, basically all the liberals. If you let her go, they're going to get upset. But today, they have another dilemma. The transcript of Joe Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur was released moments before that special counsel Robert Hur was about to testify to Joe Biden's slipping mental state. And it doesn't paint a flattering picture of the president. In the first half of the interview, Biden contradicts himself. Did he take any classified documents after his time at the White House? No, he said, but we found them. Oh, other people packed my papers up, he says. I seem to remember a former president saying that, but that guy is indicted for exactly that. The interview went on. Biden became less coherent as time went on. Sounds like my old uncle, rambling about Jill's crockery and vases and crystal pitchers in the garage, or talking about his Corvette and Jay Leno, and then not being able to recognize his own handwriting. Well, here's special counsel Robert Hur explaining how senile Joe Biden truly has become.
The president himself put his memory squarely at issue. We interviewed the president and asked him about his recorded statement. Quote, I just found all the classified stuff downstairs, end quote. He told us that he didn't remember saying that to his ghostwriter. He also said he didn't remember finding any classified material in his home after his vice presidency. And he didn't remember anything about how classified documents about Afghanistan made their way into his garage. My assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary and accurate and fair.
Special counsel Robert Hur went on to admit Joe Biden had classified documents everywhere.
Mr. Hur, classified documents were found at the Penn Biden Center?
That's correct.
They were found in President Biden's garage?
In Wilmington, Delaware, yes.
And in his basement den?
Also in the same home, yes.
In his main floor office?
Correct.
And his third floor den?
Correct.
At the University of Delaware?
Correct.
And at the Biden Institute?
Correct.
I counted 7 there, not to mention Robert Hur was very clear that this report on Joe Biden did not exonerate him.
Mr. Hur, did you completely exonerate President Biden?
That is not what my report does. The report is not an exoneration. That word does not appear in my report.
Democrats, which Joe Biden is the real Joe Biden? The juiced-up fighter we saw at the State of the Union, or the elderly old man who's lost his edge? As the Hur interview continued, if Joe Biden's a fighter, then he ought to stand trial for possession of classified documents, right? Well, if it's the second one, if he's losing his mental acuity, then maybe prosecuting him would be a miscarriage of justice. But then he definitely should not be the leader of the free world. So which Joe Biden is the real Joe Biden? Well, when you don't have a defense or want to avoid the real issue at hand, the Democrats did what they always do, predictably suggesting over and over again it's a white supremacy or a Donald Trump problem.
House Republicans may be desperate to convince America that white conservative men are on the losing end of a two-tiered justice system, a theory that appeals to the MAGA crowd but has no basis in reality. But your comments today make me wonder if you have read the special counsel's report at all.
And when the left isn't blaming Trump or white men, it's obviously a cult problem.
So who wins with this ludicrous, embarrassing spectacle? Orban wins, Putin wins, Xi wins, the tyrants of the world win. They have one more reason to celebrate Donald Trump and his cult followers, who've completely lost their way. They're looking for high crimes and misdemeanors. Now they appoint themselves amateur memory specialists, and that's what they pounce on the President of the United States about. America faces a choice between democracy and tyranny.
Obviously, all you cult members need to stand down. Your opinions don't matter. All the Democrats can do is blame Trump or his supporters or MAGA when they know their political leader is probably guilty of numerous crimes or, at the very least, guilty of colluding with foreign governments for profit. But watch Adam Shifty Schiff take a slightly different approach.
Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you did.
That did not happen, Congressman.
See, Schiff always takes the lying to fit the political narrative approach. It's worked for him in the past when he pushed the Russian hoax for several years. Why not keep it going, right? Shifty Schiff, and you want to be a senator? So again, Democrats, which Biden is the real Biden? Competent Joe who should stand trial, or elderly Joe who deserves our compassion and maybe a nice retirement come January? But here's the problem. Today, the special counsel concluded under oath that the president did, in fact, lie to him. And when we say him, we really mean he lied to the American people. Watch.
Point in your investigation, did you have any reason to believe that President Biden lied to you?
I do address in my report one response the president gave to a question that we had posed to him that we deemed to be not credible.
All this boils down to a few key facts. Joe Biden kept classified information. Joe Biden failed to properly secure that classified information. In fact, he spread it around to 9 different places. Joe Biden shared classified information with people he wasn't supposed to. If you read the transcripts or if you listened to today's testimony on Capitol Hill, you would see a man who's unable to keep track of what's going on. He wanders. He loses his train of thought. He forgets the questions. If this was all an act for Robert Hur, well, then on Sunday night, Biden should have gotten an award for Best Actor at the Academy Awards because we know he's not acting. The real Joe Biden is too old and too debilitated for the job, and voters should remember that because in November, if they don't, it could be too late to turn the country around. 4 more years of ratcheted up crime, soaring inflation, and an invasion at our southern border. Wow, that's a real dystopian nightmare I certainly hope we're not going to have to live through. And here now to break down Special Counsel Robert Hur's testimony on Capitol Hill today is Ohio Congressman and chairman of that committee, Jim Jordan. Chairman, really good to have you. Sir, good to be with you. You guys are great. You guys were fantastic. Let me touch on something. I'm sure this has been talked about all day. By the way, about a 6-hour hearing. It was fantastic. It was gripping. It was compelling. this release of the transcripts that you guys were waiting for so long, the timing of that was just so outrageously biased. So tell us what happened with that so that people understand.
Well, we got them this morning, but my understanding is the White House, had these transcripts and talked to reporters last night, but they were embargoed until this morning, and we got them this morning. So it'd be nice to have that information because that helps you prep for the kind of questions you want to ask the special counsel. So, but that's typical, that's the kind of games the White House is going to play, I guess. But I still, it's not the right way to do things. If your goal is to make sure the American people get the facts and the best possible information they can get.
One of the first things you did this morning, I think this thing started just after 10 o'clock Eastern time. One of the first things you did after the opening statements, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed something that I'm not sure the American people really knew about. Let's take a listen to this so people can understand what I'm talking about. Go ahead, play the soundbite about the book deal. Listen.
$8 million. Joe Biden had 8 million reasons to break the rules. Took classified information and shared it with the guy who was writing the book. That's why he did. He knew the rules, but he broke them for $8 million in a book advance.
Earlier you said, why exactly would Joe Biden risk his reputation and his future and his legacy on talking to someone, giving someone that, from an outsider, classified information that he knew he was not supposed to share? And it turned out it was an $8 million book advance, Congressman.
Yeah, Joe Biden knew the rules. He'd been in office for 50-some years, 5 decades, almost 50 years, I should say. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was vice president, get daily briefings, has been in the Situation Room when they're getting briefings there. So he knew the law, he knew the rules, but he said he was, I think the special counsel's words were, he had strong motivations to ignore the procedures for classified information because he was writing a book. And that's why I said that was Special Counsel Hur's statement in his report. And then I just asked the special counsel, how much did Joe Biden get paid? $8 million. That was his motivation. Because whenever there's a crime, there's always a motive. What was the motive here? I think it was the $8 million advance he got. And then he shared information, classified information, with the guy writing the book. And what did that guy do with those audio tapes that he got from Joe Biden once he knew there was a special counsel investigating this? The guy writing the book, he deleted them. He tried to get rid of them. He tried to, hide the evidence. What we call obstruction is what he engaged in, and yet Special Counsel Hur does not prosecute the ghostwriter, or, of course, he didn't decide, he didn't bring charges against President Biden either.
And at that moment, and I really didn't hear, I think I watched the whole entirety of the hearing. I was waiting for this, Congressman. So who was the ghostwriter? And so Biden is sharing classified information with some random person ghostwriting his book. Is it an outsider? Is it a foreigner? Is it a foreign agent? Do we even know who the ghostwriter was?
No, we know the gentleman's name. I don't know a whole lot about him. All I know is what was in the report, and that he was. And look, he probably gets some of that. I don't know how the book deal arrangement works. He may get some of that money. I don't know how that arrangement operates. But it was a gentleman named Mr. Mark Zwanitzer. It's in the report. But I think that's just telling. And then it was interesting because on the same page where he talks about Biden's motivations, the book being his motivation for ignoring the rules for classified information, the same page it talks about, he said he was also interested in his legacy, buttressing his legacy. And then later, Special Counsel Hur says Joe Biden viewed himself as a man of presidential timber. So it was not just the money, it was the ego. And as I said in the committee hearing, the oldest sins in the book, Eric, are pride and money. And that's what I think motivated Joe Biden to ignore the rules he knew, the law that he knew and had been familiar with for now 50 years in public service. So
$8 million when the most you've ever made is $174,000 as a senator and maybe a couple $100,000 as a vice president. $8 million is a lot of reasons maybe to bend the rules or think you're going to bend the rules without getting caught. Congressman, Chairman, the Democrats, you had them on the ropes. They had them dead to rights because the bottom line is, look, if Joe Biden is too senile to be prosecuted, as Robert Hur suggests, then he has to be, just by default, has to be too senile to run the country. They weren't sure where to go with it, but to a person, to a man and to a woman, it was somehow, let's relate this to, I felt Trump was more on trial than Joe Biden was today. Take a listen to Jerry Nadler, one of the many who complained about Trump, whined about Trump.
My ultimate conclusion was that criminal charges were not warranted.
Correct. Now let's talk about why. I have limited time, so please, when I say correct or not correct, answer the question. Are you aware that the FBI only learned that Trump was in possession of classified material after the National Archives discovered them?
Congressman, I am not intimately familiar with the facts relating to former President Trump. I'm prepared to comment on them to the extent that I address them.
Okay. Why did the Department of Justice seek a warrant to search Mar-a-Lago?
Congressman, I am not familiar with those deliberations. That is a matter that I had no participation
in. I'll tell you, it was because they were concerned that Trump had lied about possession of those documents and might conceal or destroy them.
Congressman, Chairman, first of all, is he the most annoying congressman on the Hill? Or what? I mean, it drives me, I don't know what it is about him. It just drives me crazy. He's so biased. I just can't listen to this guy very much. But to a person, Trump, what about Trump? Trump's name had to be mentioned. I'll bet you Trump's name was mentioned more than Biden.
Well, certainly from the Democrats, and you knew they would do that. But if they want to make a comparison, how about this? The classified documents that President Trump had were at his home, where there's Secret Service protection. Joe Biden had classified documents. I believe I went through this with Special Counsel Hur at 9 different locations. He had them at the Penn Biden Center here in D.C., but the Penn Biden Center was at 3 different. There was a transition location, then there was a location in the Chinatown in D.C., and then there was the final. So he had them at 3 different locations there. Then it was at the University of Delaware, at the library, University of Delaware Biden Center, and then there was in his home, in the garage, in his office, in the upstairs den, in the downstairs office. I mean, I asked Special Counsel Hur, I said, how many places? I've lost track. I mean, that's I think, a huge distinction here. But here's what's really interesting. In the last 3 election cycles for president, there have been 3 candidates: Secretary Clinton, President Biden, President Trump. All 3 were accused of mishandling classified information. Only 1 gets charged. If that isn't, and President Trump, if that doesn't show the double standard and the bias against Republicans, the bias against conservatives, the double standard that exists in our justice system, I do not know what does.
Late in that testimony, I'm glad you did this. You named all the places: in his home in Delaware, in his garage in Delaware, at the Penn Center, at the University of Delaware. Those were all the places, and others, that Joe Biden had classified documents. And you pointed this out, and this was really important. Trump had them in his private home, which was protected by Secret Service every single minute of the time, and that was so powerful. We're going to tell you what, folks. Congressman Jim Jordan, the chairman, is going to stick around with us. He's being very generous with his time. Just after the break, we have a lot more to get to, so stick around.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Glasgow. Primary polls closed in Mississippi moments ago. Election results starting to come in. Right out of the gates, President Biden is projected to win that state. Trump also projected to win Mississippi. Now, 40 GOP delegates are on the table there, 35 for the Democrat primary. In Georgia, though, President Biden projected to win there, too. So he has more than 95% of the early votes. A win will give him 108 delegates, more than enough to clinch the presidential nomination. Former President Trump picking up more than 80% of the early votes in Georgia. 59 GOP delegates up for grabs in that state. Trump needs more than 130 to clinch the Republican nomination. Trump could do it with wins in Washington State, Mississippi, and Hawaii later tonight. National correspondent Mike Carter, he's live in Fulton County with the latest. Mike?
Hey, thanks, John. Well, new ABC News Ipsos poll out this week shows Donald Trump dominating Joe Biden on a variety of issues, including the economy. More Americans trust Donald Trump when it comes to the economy by 12 points over Joe Biden. I'm here with Deborah Baker. You're a DeKalb County. That's right, DeKalb County GOP member. Deborah, why do more Americans seem to trust Donald Trump when it comes to the economy over Joe Biden?
Well, I think the greatest thing is inflation right now, and I think energy is driving that. So the cost of energy impacts absolutely everything we do. So everything you buy, whether it's gas or your food or the manufacturing of every product. So I think energy is where Donald Trump really was on target.
And those prices have certainly gone up. Inflation, another one of those key issues. Donald Trump dominating Joe Biden. And this new poll, guys, shows Donald Trump up 14 points over Joe Biden when it comes to the issue of inflation as well. John, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike Carter. Appreciate that. Stick around. We have more election coverage throughout the evening. We're going to check in on states. Washington State, still the voters out there looking to get their ballots in. We'll have updates on that coming up as well once those polls are closed. Also, we'll have more results from Georgia as well as Mississippi when those results start coming in. We'll back in a few.
Still, it's a massive story, folks. This is a massive, massive story. Is the president even competent to run for president? And what did he do? There's so much to break down from Special Counsel Robert Hur's bombshell testimony today. One thing which shouldn't come as a surprise, the Democrats in the room did everything they could to make this about Trump.
Special Counsel Hur repeatedly emphasizes that President Biden's conduct contrasts sharply with that of former President Trump. He sets forth these points of difference in detail. Quote, most notably after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for months, but he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and to lie about it.
You know, it's amazing how this case has nothing to do with the former president at all, but as they typically do, Democrats were quick to pull the Trump card when they ran out of ways to defend their own big guy, Mr. 10%. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan rejoins us right now. Congressman, very good to see. Thank you for spending so much time with us. Jamie Raskin, Eric Swalwell, it was one thing after, and Trump. Like we said in the last segment, I'll bet you Trump's name was uttered more by Democrats than Biden. Go ahead.
Yeah, and to Mr. Raskin, he said there are allegations that someone may have destroyed documents relative to President Trump. Those are allegations. We know for certain that the guy who was writing Joe Biden's book, that he was getting paid $8 million, that Special Counsel Hur said was the motivation for Joe Biden to ignore the processes and procedures on protecting classified documents. We know that ghostwriter destroyed the evidence on his laptop. He tried, that is truly, if there's not obstruction of justice, I don't know what is, but he doesn't get charged.
Not until he realized that there was a special counsel, Robert Hur, on the case. He had those things, and he shot him over to his however they burn him now, when he found out there was going to be an investigation.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going to talk about, quote, allegations against President Trump by the most partisan Jack Smith, who's been overturned by the Supreme Court in another investigation he did, 9-0, for goodness sake. So they're talking about that versus what happened here, where the book writer, the ghostwriter, destroys evidence and he doesn't get charged.
All right, very quickly, you're killing it today. You're fantastic. I'm so thrilled that you're chairman of that committee. Gates also had a really good opening salvo. Take a listen to a little bit of that.
Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The president, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yeah, so it's a lie. It's just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right. So the next one. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right?
I'm not sure what's worse, that the guy lied or where he is mentally. I mean, what kind of character does the seated president have?
Yeah, it's not the first time that the White House has said things that were not accurate, but I think you're right on the fundamental point. On one hand, you have the special counsel saying Joe Biden willfully retained and disclosed information classified information to people he wasn't allowed to disclose it to, namely this ghostwriter on his memoirs. And then on the other hand, you have, but we're not going to prosecute him because he's an forgetful old man who a jury would find sympathy for. So it really does, it just doesn't make sense. And then the same guy who is a forgetful old man says in a press conference after the report comes out, I didn't do that. And of course, the special counsel, after the questioning from Mr. Gates, says that's not accurate. That's not what we found. So you have all those inconsistencies there. But in the end, the one guy who's getting prosecuted, again, underscoring this double standard, is President Trump. And I think the country sees it for what it is. They see the double standard. They see the attack time and time again that's been happening from the Justice Department on President Trump.
Incredible. Incredible. Thank you, Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of that committee. Appreciate your time. Very, very insightful hearing today, and your perspectives are spot on. Thank you. All right, folks, with the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Haiti, Biden's administration has now had to evacuate 5 U.S. embassies across the world under his watch. The president's lack of leadership is putting Americans' lives at risk and will most likely result in thousands of more Haitian military-aged men to cross over our southern border like they have been. We're going to break this down next. Tensions and political violence continue to escalate in Haiti after vicious gangs attacked the nation's capital, forcing a 5th evacuation of a U.S. embassy under Joe Biden's presidency. After meeting with Caribbean leaders, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken pledged $100 million to finance the deployment of a multinational force to Haiti, following another promised $33 million. Just keep sending the money away, folks. And where's the money coming from, you may ask? Taxpayer pockets. Of course. Join me now is National Border Patrol Council Vice President Art Del Cueto. Art, really good to see you. You know, my concern is not what's happening in Haiti. Call me cold. I'm a libertarian. I deal with your own garbage. My concern is with all these people fleeing this coup or whatever's happening, they're going to pour over our southern border. There are already Haitians coming across the border as it is. Am I wrong? Tell us the risk.
In record number, to be honest. And look, we've seen it before. That our government continues to give money to these other countries, and what we see is right after that an influx of those individuals from that country that are now coming into the U.S. And right now, this has been just a disaster. Let's be honest. From day one of this administration, and it's the people from over 160 different countries have been pouring across our borders. We have no idea where they're at now, obviously in the United States. And it's just become so easy for people from all over the world to just claim asylum, come across, you fingerprint them, and they get released, and they get a court date many years from now. But here's the big problem. We don't know what criminal record these people may have in their own country. So if they've never been arrested by anyone in the United States, and there's no record within the U.S., potentially all these other countries can be releasing their criminals into our country, and we have no way of knowing that.
Art, if they're coming from several thousand miles away in China, and we're talking about how many Chinese nationals are coming across, tens of thousands, they're going to come from the Caribbean. It's a much easier way to get over to South America and come right up South America through Mexico into our southern border. We should expect more Haitians, I guess, right?
No, that's exactly right. And again, look, what it comes down to is the drug cartels are the ones that make all the deals with, these other countries, and they get involved with the human smuggling organizations. So the cartels are the ones that are going to determine where these groups are going to cross. That's why you see groups in caravans that they say, hey, there's another caravan of 10,000 people that are coming across the border, but you don't see that one big caravan cross. That's because once they do get to areas along the border, the drug cartels are the ones that are going to control where the groups are going to cross. The drug cartels separate them. They do it on purpose. That way, they know that they distract law enforcement to different areas, because ultimately the drug cartel wants to get their drugs across the border. So it's such a big fiasco, and it's all done by the drug cartels. They're the ones that are in control. And again, we continue to see, inactions from this administration, and there's just no end in sight.
All right, I have about half a minute or so, but what happens in these coups, we see in Venezuela, we see it around the world. We saw it in Afghanistan. Whenever someone takes over for a seated government, they open the jails and the bad people, they let the bad people out. And this, I got to assume this is happening now.
There's been a huge amount of individuals from Venezuela that have now entered into the United States. I just got off the phone with some friends of mine and other law enforcement agencies, and they themselves have said that they're seeing a huge uptick in of some Venezuelan street gang.
Art Del Cueto, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up, you know what a prepper is? Well, it's a survivalist, but it's becoming a different animal. We'll explain next. Stick around.
I'm John Glasgow. Early election results coming in. Georgia, Mississippi heading to the polls as expected. President Biden and former President Trump both projected to win both states. Newsmax is projecting President Biden will be the Democrat nominee with 2 state wins so far. Trump can clinch the Republican nomination tonight, too. In Mississippi, Trump leading with more than 90% of the early vote, 40 GOP delegates on the line there. President Biden is running uncontested in Mississippi, so no surprise that he'll take the delegates there. In Georgia, President Biden with more than 90% of the early votes as well. There's 108 delegates that are on the line there, so that's more than enough to clinch the presidential nomination. Former President Trump picking up more than 80% of the early votes in Georgia. 59 GOP delegates are up for grabs in that state. He needs 130 to clinch the Republican nomination, so we will wait and watch. Washington State is up next, Mississippi, as we're watching right now, and Hawaii later tonight. So for more, let's welcome in Newsmax senior correspondent John Huddy is live from Boca Raton, Florida. Good evening to you, John.
Yeah, John, good evening to you. And former President Trump is really well on his way to securing that GOP nomination. You know, there were questions about whether mathematically he had the number of delegates or he was going to reach that number, that 1,215 delegate mark tonight. But it looks like he's getting there. It looks like right at this point, according to our decision desk headquarters, he's at about 1,184. So, you know, he's well on his way. One of the things we're seeing real quick in Georgia is that while Trump is easily cruising to victory there, Nikki Haley, who despite dropping out of the race, is also picking up a chunk of votes in places like Chatham County, which is where Savannah's located. She got 35% of the vote there. So this is probably something, John, that the Trump campaign is going to be analyzing going forward. Biden's campaign, meanwhile, released a statement this evening warning that, quote, the threat Trump poses is greater than ever. So that's really what the Biden campaign is going, the narrative they're going with. However, immigration, the economy, America's border crisis, and crime remain top issues for voters through the primaries and again tonight, John.
All right, we will continue to watch, and we will bring more election results coming up here. Newsmax senior correspondent John Huddy, thank you so much, and we will be back in a few.
So what's a prepper? Well, simply put, it's someone, a survivalist, who believes a catastrophic event or emergency is likely to occur in the future, and he or she preps for it. This can be based on political trends, failures of the private sector, or government, or even worse, government overreach and incompetence. So they buy guns, they buy ammunition, food supplies, everything you can imagine. But here's the thing. We can probably agree that most survivalists tend to be Republican or libertarian in nature, and generally speaking, they've tended to be white. Okay, so what? Meanwhile, the left loves to mock preppers for their beliefs. They say they're conspiracy theorists, but there's something very interesting going on right now that no one's talking about. The prepper community is becoming far more diverse amid fears of disaster and political unrest. And that right there, folks, look at that. It's according to none other than NBC News, of all places, not known for the conservative, libertarian, or pro-white views. The number of preppers has doubled to about 20 million since 2017 as more progressives and minorities join the prepper community. Progressives. The left can't stand this. It's their worst nightmare because there's only one thing that the left loves more than themselves. Set aside veganism and soy-based lattes. They love diversity. It's king for them, or queen, depending on the day and how it identifies. And the one community they don't want diversified is the prepper community. These are people who fully embrace rugged individualism, self-reliance, and perhaps an inherent distrust of government. These are people that you cannot control. This runs antithetical to the left's love for strong centralized government and its paternalistic nature. Liberals love to trade their freedoms in for the free stuff government has to offer. Conservatives do not, but that seems to be changing. At a survivalist and prepper show in a liberal district where Biden won by nearly 57 points, attendees saw bearded white men with closely cropped hair and heavily tattooed arms alongside hippie moms carrying babies in rainbow-colored slings and chatting about canning methods. Also saw Latino families looking over greenhouses and water filtration systems. Talk about diversity. Folks, preppers were once seen as conspiratorial weirdos, but there's an awakening going on. Hippies and minorities are realizing that the way we're going in Biden's America, leftist America, things are unsustainable. You can't rely on government to feed you and protect you forever. This is diversity at its best, but it's also a sad indictment of the role of government in America. People are becoming disillusioned and losing faith in the system. And we can lay blame at the feet of the political elites who falsely sold the American people a bill of goods that they can do everything for them, but they can't. So it's no surprise that the sheep realize there's a wolf in their midst, and that wolf is the left and their tyranny of good intentions. Contrary to what the liberal media will tell you, prepping took a nosedive nationwide when Trump took office. There were fewer prepper conventions held across the U.S. simply because Donald Trump calmed their fears. And that, by the way, is according to Business Insider, another not-so-conservative publication. So it's amazing that under Joe Biden, the prepper community has never been so active and is actually diversifying. We're talking lesbians and gay preppers, blacks and Latinos, left and right. For once, we can all agree on something. Government is not the answer. Government is not your friend. You're your own first responder. This is something the right has been saying for a while. We have been here. So it's no surprise the prepper community is diversifying, and so too is the Republican Party. Just look at the headlines. Why is Biden losing support from people of color? Minorities finding a new political home. Dems lose ground with black and Hispanic adults. Folks, we're in the middle of an awakening. This is diversity at its finest, at least for the right. This isn't some government or human resource scheme forcing inclusion. According to Gallup, black Americans shifted right by 19 points. Hispanics shifted right by 16 points. Conservatives are now solidly Republican, and black conservatives favor Republicans over Democrats for the first time since 2022. And this is the result of many things, including rising crime. The left allowed BLM and Antifa to riot and loot businesses during COVID lockdowns.
Decided that if it got out of hand, I wanted to make sure that I had some protection for myself.
Tony says he was in the military, but he's not really a gun guy. He explains it was seeing the recent unrest that motivated him to buy a shotgun.
So I'm anxious. You know, these times are anxious in general.
People are starting to experience fear and realize that they have to take their safety and their protection seriously, and that it's their responsibility. It's up to them to take care of themselves. They realize that police officers are extremely busy and they're not always available.
In predominantly minority communities in Democrat-run cities, no one feels safe with the rising crime, so it's no surprise in 2022 there was a 58% increase in African Americans buying guns. 58. 49% increase with Hispanics buying guns, and 43% increase in Asians buying firearms. And which political party unequivocally defends Americans' right to bear arms? Obviously, it's not the Democrats. It's the Republican Party. And Donald Trump deserves a ton of credit. He's done more than any other Republican to broaden the tent. Under Trump, economic conditions were far better. Taxes were lower. People were buying homes and moving up the social ladder. And now it looks like Joe Biden is far more concerned with the affairs of other nations over ours. At the end of the day, there's one thing the left hates. It's diversity of thought, diversity of preppers, and diversity of the Republican Party. All of this points to an American renaissance, an awakening that crosses race, color, gender, and creed, and that is something we here can all celebrate. Coming up, the ongoing debate about men and women's sports just proves that anything goes here in Joe Biden's twisted nation. It's time to start protecting our children. America, my next two guests would agree. Men do not belong in women's sports. I can't believe I'm still saying this. Last month, a high school girls basketball game ended and was called off at halftime after 3 girls suffered injuries, as you can see in that video right there. We've seen it before. It's just scary. While facing off against a male player who is 6 feet tall and has facial hair. And this incident from last year, high school volleyball player suffered severe head injuries, head and neck injuries actually, after a transgender opponent violently spiked the ball directly at her face. She's reportedly still dealing with impaired vision, partial paralysis on the right side of her body, and of course, depression. We're not doing enough to protect our children. It's amazing how fast things change. For decades, developing women's sports in the United States was such a focus, both on a professional level and with our youth. But here in Joe Biden's twisted nation, we make our girls compete against biological males, putting their confidence, their athletic future, and their safety and health at risk. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville, along with former ESPN host Sage Steele, both join me now. Coach, I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. You have a bill that you're announcing, but Sage, I want to talk to you because you have been just in the news lately since last summer. The whole dust up with ESPN, with Leah Thomas, and what? Tell us your story very quickly and why this means so much to you.
At this point, I'm just a former sportscaster who continues to care about women and girls and women's sports. And to me, I don't understand why this has become a political issue. We focused so much on science over the last couple of years, particularly since 2020 and the pandemic. And all of a sudden, we're forgetting the science and the facts when it comes to men and boys in girls and women's sports. To me, it's pretty clear, the evidence. Zero excuse for it to be allowed to this level, the level that it has been and is right now. And I don't understand why our leadership is allowing it, especially considering that this is the leadership that claims to be the party for women. Right now, and I think Senator Coach will agree, we talked about this just a minute ago, there's so much fear because I believe that the people who are preaching to allow men to play women's and girls sports don't actually believe that deep down. For some reason, they're going hard on this one. So yes, did I stand up for myself against ESPN and Disney and the wokeness and the lack of diversity of thought? Yes. I'm proud of that. That's past history. Now I'm so grateful to be able to speak out without any repercussions and fight for these young women and girls who they just want to be athletes. They just want to continue what all the people that came before us, Title IX, fought for, and now they're being told that they can't, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and Coach, it seems to be only woke liberals that are interested in keeping biological men in women's sports for some reason, and the Biden administration continues to defend it, saying that they'll cut off funding to any school that doesn't protect biological men from competing and sometimes hurting women. Yeah?
Well, there's no doubt about that, Eric. This is an attack on the nuclear family, attack on gender. But it's truly, this is an attack nobody can understand. I know the Democrats, at least Democrats that have daughters, that have granddaughters, they don't believe this, but they're following the party line. And this is not about politics. This is about right and wrong. This is about good versus evil. We don't have much long to straighten this out. But elections do have consequences. Joe Biden has stood up and said that, he's not going to stand up for women. He's going to stand up for people that believe that they're women, and it's wrong. And if we don't stop it now, and if the adults in the room don't stand up, coaches, ex-players, athletic directors, presidents, if they don't stand up right now and put this in front of their job and the things that they're doing, we're going to have huge problems.
Now, Sage, I saw you after the State of the Union. You had some harsh words for President Biden, and rightly so. I mean, he screwed up the name of Laken Riley, called her Lincoln Riley, who happens to be a football coach. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just heartbroken over the whole thing, and that is an absolute tragedy that should never have happened. And then to go on and basically apologize for using the word illegal instead of undocumented, because that person is an illegal immigrant in this country, period. So, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately, with this president that has proven that he doesn't have what it takes mentally any longer to do the job properly. And with this, again, this should not be a political issue. I don't understand how anyone in a leadership role who is making decisions can say that this is okay. We talk so much about, well, and the mental health for trans people, and yes, that matters, not at the expense of women and girls who have gone through so much just to fight to get in that role.
Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
Much more balance ahead, straight ahead. Oh, that's all the time we have. Tomorrow, another big show. Senator Tim Scott and Congressman Chip Roy will join us. Greg Kelly Reports is up next. Never forget, keep the balance.
All these cases against Donald Trump, you need some witnesses. The government has to apply pressure to get people to talk to them, and that's where this guy comes in. The whole thing about the documents, and you heard Robert Hur and Joe Biden and getting off scot-free, I'll get to that soon. But first, Donald Trump is still in trouble over this nonsense. In part, quite frankly, thanks to this guy. I don't know how much I blame him. His name is Brian Butler. He worked for Donald Trump for many years at Mar-a-Lago and maybe other facilities, and they got along really well. But then an atrocity happened. Mar-a-Lago was raided by the FBI August 8th, 2022. I'll always remember that moment where I was. I felt like the whole world had shifted. I didn't understand anything, really, for a few minutes. The FBI? The FBI? Well, they did it. They shouldn't have. You know, the FBI, they're kind of banking on prestige they accumulated decades ago, and for people to somehow remember that. And some people do, and think that the FBI are, oh, it's a great law enforcement agency. No, it's crummy. It needs to be totally dismantled and reformed. New name. But when the FBI shows up like they did to our friend Mr. Naive, I mean Brian Butler, people get nervous.
Why are you speaking out publicly with your story now?
Well, I mean, it's been almost a year since FBI agents showed up at my house when my wife was at home. And, you know, over the course of the last year, emotionally, it's been a roller coaster.
So the FBI shows up at his house. He works for Donald Trump. I could see that rocking his world, right? I mean, he probably grew up thinking that the FBI, the DOJ, right, they're the good guys. Of course they are. Well, he doesn't know what we know about how they become a partisan weapon used by Democrats. He's going off the old information, not the new. So the FBI, they must have something really, really important to talk to Mr. Naive about. Let's hear the crux of his story. This is what he had to offer the FBI.
We got to the airport. I ended up loading all the luggage I had, and he had a bunch of boxes.
You noticed that he had boxes?
Oh, yeah. They were the boxes that were in the indictment, the white banker's boxes. That's what I remember loading. We were just taking them out of the Escalade, piling them up. I remember they were all stacked on top of each other, and then we're lifting them up to the pilots.
How many boxes was it?
You know, they asked me in the interview, and I believe it was 10 to 15. At the same time he's going in there, the boxes are going from somewhere into a vehicle, which are eventually going to the plane, which I load. Look, I didn't even know what I was moving until I was at the plane, and that's when I remember moving boxes.
Wow, that's a lot of boxes. Boxes. I remember when they indicted Trump, right? The pictures of all the boxes. There were boxes all over the place. There were boxes on the stage. There were boxes in the bathroom. There were boxes in the storage room. There were boxes all over the place. They wanted us to be really freaked out by these boxes. Folks, there's nothing to be freaked out about, because of all those boxes, How many classified documents did the FBI actually get? How many? It's in the indictment. 102 documents at Mar-a-Lago. 102 pages of material. Here's one box. Here's 120 pages worth of stuff. It fits, all right? I like to make this point. Those pictures were designed to scare people and mislead people, maybe even our friend Mr. Naive. How many times did he tell the box story and what Sam said to Fred, who said to this guy and that guy? How many times did Jack Smith and his boys talk to Mr. Naive?
I should be clear, Jack Smith's investigators sought you out. How many times do you think have you talked to investigators now?
I'd say probably between 4 and 5 times.
And that's harassment. The FBI, 4 or 5 times to talk about those boxes. Oh, but there was also the security cameras at Mar-a-Lago. I don't think that was on the warrant, actually, the security cameras. But there are security cameras because it's not an ordinary home. It's a great big palatial club, and people are there. Check this out.
Yuscil Taveras he was the IT employee at Mar-a-Lago that in the indictment it says Carlos had the conversation with about deleting the server, right?
Correct. But that's the first I had ever heard of that, is when a friend tells me that my friend's in trouble.
All right, I barely know what's going on at this point, okay? It is so ludicrous, all of this stuff. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is throwing around this junk all over Delaware and Maryland and Washington, D.C. and Virginia and the garage. But I do know this, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. The idea, take a look at this, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now, folks, did the Founding Fathers, did they know about security cameras, right? You know, we have these things that can watch the room for 24/7 all the time, hallways, whatever. They weren't thinking about that. You got your documents, you got your boxes. Now you want to see all of that footage? It is crazy. Mr. Naive here, though, again, he trusts the FBI. He trusts the government. Quick review why you shouldn't at this point. Certainly not if you're Donald Trump, okay? Who remembers Peter Strzok and Lisa Page? This has all been swept under the rug, but top-level FBI executives plotted for Trump to lose the 2016 election, and they are still mad. Anybody remember Jim Comey? Yeah, before Mueller, the Mueller report, there was Jim Comey. This guy was so utterly fireable, they investigated Trump for firing the fireable guy. Even Democrats wanted this guy gone. It is insane. Back to Mr. Naive, all right? Here he talks about, there's something to this, actually. There's something to this. Not about Trump, but what they're doing, what the FBI, what the culture is doing. Take a look.
This is the thing I see. This guy has, the former president has divided the nation like I've never seen before. And he's now divided like my best friend since I was 19 years old, almost. You know, we've been friends for so long. And just think, now you're just, I don't know. It's just very, it sucks.
All right. His friend worked at Trump, and the guy has been indicted, and they're not talking to each other because this guy's a witness essentially against him. And the government, totalitarian states, I heard that they like to do that. You know, get friends to turn on friends, family members to turn on family members. This is the excess. Trump is not dividing this country. How about the people who tried to sabotage his administration in 2016, 2017, 18, 19? The DOJ, the FBI, they're still at it. They're still at it. You want to talk about dividing the country? Listen, I mean, if people believe that this is a good thing, transgender, whatever, drag queens hanging around with children, that's where our leaders are right now. We don't have to be united right now, actually. This is bad. This is horrible. And those who think it's good, I don't want to be united with them. Those who think the border should be wide open, Where is the compromise with those people? How do you find unity? I actually don't think there is any unifying over that issue, but people can be persuaded. This is what's going on. We're the good guys. We're not the bad guys. And meanwhile, Joe Biden, Corvette, all that junk, all that classified stuff he had no right to in the garage, and he gets off scot-free. Talk about a rigged system. But we're still in the game. All right, what's next? Cassidy Hutchinson. I had her number 2 years ago. I thought that she was very, well, not to be believed, quite frankly. I found that she lacked credibility. Even when she said things, they weren't of any significant import. Very strange. The media embraced her, so did Democrats, and Liz Cheney, because of the way she looked, quite frankly. Looked like a star witness, so she must be a star witness.
Cassidy Hutchinson was an exemplary witness who demonstrated remarkable courage and character.
Cassidy Hutchinson made a brave choice today.
Look, I think that what Cassidy Hutchinson did was an unbelievable example of bravery and of courage and patriotism in the face of real pressure.
She was a great witness. She was absolutely precise. She was just brilliant.
A 26-year-old patriot.
All right, and it goes on like this. Why? What do they like? They like the way she looked. Now, the January 6th committee, they put together that report, which in and of itself is I think, a crime. It's a corrupt document, political document. It does nothing to talk about the actual failures, insecurity, which happened on January 6th. And finally, we have a government document from the House Administration's Subcommittee on Oversight. This is Congressman Loudermilk's work, and it's fantastic and also very disturbing. They write that since Liz Cheney's committee failed to sufficiently investigate the security failures, as a result, the Capitol is no safer today than it was when the Select Committee was created. In order to properly protect the institution in the framework of American democracy, Congress must take a serious look at why the Capitol was so ill-prepared and what security changes are needed to ensure adequate protection. Can you believe it that they actually didn't do it? You know, all this time, all this politics, and Cassidy Hutchinson, one of my favorite parts of this report, I mean, they catch her. They catch her. She was, they believe, deceptive, and I think they have a great case here. In finding after finding, the testimony of 4 White House employees directly contradicts claims made by Cassidy Hutchinson. It goes on to say, her public testimony is directly contradicted by the White House employees and the U.S. Secret Service agents' transcribed interviews, which were never released publicly. More, there's more. Everything she said, they found a big problem with. She tells a new version of events and explicitly contradicts many statements she made under oath in her initial 3 transcribed interviews. And it goes on, all right? There's a huge problem here. The other wild thing is, even her stories actually weren't significant. Yet they made this person the star. They're reorganizing the government based on what she said. Listen to this.
I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall, and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the Attorney General's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall.
All right, if that's true, what difference does it make? It's gossip. It's gossip. I don't think it is true, but it's gossip. It's incredible. They feasted on this, yet they neglected, why was there only 1 cop guarding the Capitol in this critical avenue of approach? You see that? At 11, that is Peace Circle. There's 1 Capitol police officer because of politics, because of Nancy Pelosi. It's all in this baby. We'll have more when I come back.
All right, I'm John Glasgow, and your primary election update here. Newsmax is projecting that President Biden will be the Democrat presidential nominee. Biden expected to win Georgia and Mississippi tonight. Trump still needs 130 delegates to win the Republican presidential nomination, and it could happen tonight. Let's take a look here. Trump leading in Mississippi, where 40 GOP delegates are on the line. President Biden running uncontested in that state, so he'll pick up the delegates there. Georgia, the biggest prize of the night, Trump leading that state, where 59 GOP delegates are at stake. Washington State and Hawaii, they are on deck later this evening. We will get those updates when they come to us. Let's go now to national correspondent Mike Carter, live in Fulton County. And Trump is projected to win Georgia. The question, Mike, can he flip the state in the general?
Yeah, that's the real big question, John. You know, Donald Trump lost Georgia in 2020 to Joe Biden by less than 1/4 percentage point. So what does he have to do this time around to win Georgia in November? Well, let's ask someone who knows. Fulton County GOP Chair Stephanie Andres. Stephanie, look, you know Georgia. You know what it takes to win here. What does Donald Trump have to do differently this time around?
Donald Trump won the Republican vote overwhelmingly today, and it's time for the Republicans and for the residents of Fulton County and Georgia to stand up. They need a president that's going to support we the people. It's we the people's job to stand up, look at his accomplishments, stop putting personalities in place, and get a president who's going to stand up for us and do and say what is necessary to support we the people of the United States of America, state of Georgia, and Fulton County.
All right, there you go. Almost 400,000 people have moved to Georgia over the last 4 years, guys. So there is a whole new electorate for Donald Trump to tap into this time around. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Newsmax national correspondent Mike Carter giving us the boots on the ground feel there in Fulton County, Georgia. We'll have more election coverage throughout the night. We've got Washington State. They're coming up next. There's some delegates on the line there. Former President Trump, like I said, needs more than 130 delegates yet to try to clinch that Republican presidential nomination. It is likely that he will do that tonight. A lot of states are projecting that Trump will take this. You can see there, picking up 83% of the votes in Georgia, more than 350,000 votes. We'll have more throughout the night.
No joke. One police officer guarding Peace Circle. That's 100 yards or so from the Capitol. Why? Is that suspicious? I think it's suspicious. Should that have been investigated? Yes. Instead, anytime law enforcement came up, give them medals. Give them Ashley Babbitt was killed. Give people medals. Crazy. Now, what happened with the intelligence? You know, everybody basically up and down the eastern seaboard knew that bad stuff could happen on January 6th. And the Capitol Police had intelligence indicating as much. Let's go to Loudermilk's report, please. This is what they knew ahead of time. In the days immediately before January 6th, the 11CD, that's their intelligence unit, received additional concerning intelligence indicating plans to attack the Capitol. That's pretty damn specific. This is even more specific. On January 1st, they learned of detailed plans to storm the federal buildings through their tip line 5 days before. Was anything done? No, and one of the reasons why, because Nancy Pelosi, she had politicized the whole damn thing. So it was supposed to be the sergeant-at-arms. It was all supposed to be apolitical. Speaker Pelosi, though, used her influence to command Capitol Police to enforce her directives in coordination with the House Sergeant-at-Arms. But here's the thing. The Sergeant-at-Arms serves as a nonpartisan role as the Senate's chief law enforcement and protocol officer and is the administrative manager for a host of support services in the Senate. It's much the same way in the House. And Nancy was a political operative who did not live up to her responsibilities and meddled where she shouldn't have. Back to Cassidy Hutchinson. This one really, really bothered me. In front of the American people, in front of, well, scores of journalists, thousands of journalists, they said something that I think it was quite obvious that it could not have been true. Take a look.
Have you seen this note before?
That's a note that I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff on January 6th, likely around 3 o'clock.
And it's written on a Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson?
That's my handwriting.
Is that a woman's handwriting? Is that a 23-year-old woman woman's handwriting. I don't mean to be a, I don't know, but that's not a woman's handwriting, folks. No way. Next, please.
There were two phrases on there, one illegal and then one without proper authority. The illegal phrase was the one that Mr. Meadows had dictated to me. Mr. Hirschman had chimed in and said, also put without legal authority. There should have been a slash between the two phrases.
Doesn't matter what she's saying. She looks great saying it. And they could assign and project all they wanted to. But she says she's sitting there with all these guys, and she's kind of taking the notes as they dictate. Can I see the note one more time? Can you see the note? All right. That's not a man's handwriting. In fact, we have an example. We've been provided with an actual example of Cassidy Hutchinson's true handwriting. What do you think? Yeah, that looks like a girl's handwriting. You don't have to be an FBI forensic specialist to figure this out. Okay, can we see them side by side? This is what they told the American people. That handwriting on the left is Cassidy Hutchinson's. On the right, no way, no way. And by the way, there's a lawyer who worked at the White House who swears that that's his handwriting on the left. But they didn't care. They just pushed it. And something that Donald Trump and anybody working in Washington has to start thinking about. There are too many young people at the White House. Here's Cassidy Hutchinson on Air Force One. She's 23 years old. It's her first job out of college. Do you have the maturity and the experience to be working a few feet from the president at that age? I certainly didn't. I wasn't ready. Here she is walking down the White House colonnade, showing Jim George. I mean, no. You have to have more experience, right? Is that fair? And ever since, it's been awards and best-selling books, and the whole thing is phony. I'm still going through this, the committee report from Loudermilk, but it's dynamite, and it's not getting any coverage. It should. We should have primetime hearings on this. It's just you and me, though, and that's all right. I'll be right back. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a Republican of South Carolina, verbally slaughtered George Stephanopoulos this weekend. Has anybody seen him lately? How's he holding up? It was something to behold. He was incredibly inappropriate, rude, totally partisan. We talked about it last night, and I'm pleased to be joined by the champion, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican of South Carolina, and a firm supporter of Donald Trump in 2024. How are you? And are people still approaching you in airports and telling you that was amazing?
Yeah, and my colleagues in Congress on the floor tonight, too. And I got to tell you, Greg, my mom is a big fan. So shout out to Mom, who's a big fan of Greg Kelly. She loves watching you, by the way.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Mace. Is that what she goes by?
Yes, she sure does.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Mace. So seriously, tell us in your words, again, what he was trying to do. He was trying to say if something bad happened to you, then you must vote a certain way politically, wasn't he?
Right. Well, he was shaming me as a rape victim. I went on to ABC's This Week on Sunday with George Stephanopoulos. I mean, I go into the Lion's Den. I'll talk to anybody because I feel like they're independent voters that need to hear our message. We need those voters to come to our side to support Donald Trump. So I'll go into the Hornet's Nest. I'll go into the Lion's Den. I'll make my case. But I went on there, and the first thing he leads with is a story about my rape. I was raped at the age of 16 by a classmate of mine in high school. Totally out of nowhere, he goes there, and he tries to bully me and shame me for being a victim of rape, for supporting Donald Trump. And oh, by the way, he made several statements that were patently false because Donald Trump has not ever been convicted of rape, not in a criminal case, not in a civil case, none of that. I think he opened himself up and ABC News up to significant liability, and I hope that he sues George Stephanopoulos and ABC News over what happened on Sunday as well.
Well, it was pretty amazing. You know, magnificent things can come from pretty crummy things, and that little stunt that he pulled. And quite frankly, I know people who are seeing you in a whole new light. Let's take a look at a little bit of what went down. Let's go with C02, please. C02.
I mean, you keep saying I'm shaming you.
You are. The question, it is.
How is the question asking you about a presidential candidate who's
You're
been
asking a rape victim.
And there's no question about that. And
You're
you've
questioning my
courageously
political
talked
choices
about
because
that.
I've been raped. I think that's disgusting.
No, I'm questioning your political choices because you're supporting
shaming me. You're trying
someone
to
who's been
shame
found
me.
liable for rape. Actually, I'm not trying to
You
shame
are. That's exactly
You're not
what
answering
you're
the
doing.
question.
I think it's disgusting.
Well, you're welcome to say that, but you have to answer the question. Why are you supporting someone who's been found liable for rape?
You have to answer the question. It's almost like why do they talk to anybody if they already know what the answer is supposed to be? All right. Now, can you tell us a little bit you haven't always been a Donald Trump fan, correct?
Well, we've had our ups and downs, but we've come a long way. I was actually an OG on Donald Trump's campaign in 2015 and 2016. I worked for him, but we haven't always seen eye to eye, and that's okay. I don't agree with everyone 100% of the time on 100% of the things. But we're on Team Trump. I believe he's the only man who can save America. And I believe that the support that he has right now, not just in my home state of South Carolina, but across the country, is stronger than it's ever been before. And look, since January 6th, which is where he and I had some disagreement, we've had 3 years of Joe Biden. We have seen the amount of damage that Joe Biden has done to this country. And the point I made to George Stephanopoulos on Sunday was that Laken Riley's family wasn't with Joe Biden on Saturday at the dueling rallies. Her family was with Donald Trump. And he's the man that can get all of the things that Joe Biden has destroyed in our country back on track, to include securing the border, to include getting our spending under control and lowering the rate of inflation, all these things. And just because someone is raped doesn't mean they should have to vote a certain way. I mean, it's just outrageous because what the left did is show us who they are. And when they show us who they are, we ought to believe them. They don't respect women, and they bully victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault, and it's outrageous.
This was one of my favorite moments, though. I don't think George really has much to say here, but it's a member of Congress talking about their responsibilities to represent. This is sometimes lost on the fake news. And let's take a look at that. C03 Alpha.
I said my piece on January 6th. I was very clear about how I felt about it. And I also, as you stated, I voted to certify the Electoral College for every single state in the country. But something's happened between now and then, and that was Joe Biden. And I listened to my voters. They move on. They don't ask me about January 6th. Maybe that's what you in the media, you guys talk about in your cocktail parties. But voters are not talking about it. They asked me about February 22nd, the day that Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal immigrant.
And
they asked me about October 8th.
That's the part I wanted to. And we talked about Laken Riley, and we will never stop talking about Laken Riley. But talking to your constituents and listening to them, somehow, like, I don't know, they think that lawmakers must, if you felt one way in 2014, there's no changing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and look, voters have moved on. They have moved on from January 6th. They don't care about that. They care about February 22nd. Everyone is paying attention to that story and that young girl. She would be alive today and would be a nurse if Donald Trump were president. I also tell the story about October 8th when Maddie Hines, a 4-year-old girl in South Carolina, was murdered by an illegal immigrant. Her killer was deported under Donald Trump and allowed back into the state of South Carolina from our southern border under Joe Biden. This kind of thing, these murders of these women and girls, it's happening all across the country. And finally, people are waking up. They're not looking at the past, they're looking at the future. And life was a heck of a lot better under Donald Trump. And I also want to say one last thing, because George Stephanopoulos played like he was Mr. Tough Guy. Well, look, I've been through some tough things. I'm the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. And I can tell you firsthand, that guy would not last 30 seconds at the Citadel. And I'm just really proud of conservatives, Republicans, and even many independents and left of center people who came to my defense over the last 2 or 3 days and said, what he did is wrong. We got to protect women. We got to protect victims of sexual assault. And Republicans came through through and through the last couple of days, and we should be really proud of our party and our country right now.
You know, that is really amazing that you're the first graduate. I remember the first female student who didn't fare that well, left after a couple of weeks or whatever, maybe a few days.
An
I think we
hour.
have a picture
Greg,
of you
she left
graduating.
after an hour. She left after an hour. Yeah.
Well, there you are, graduating from the Citadel, which is no picnic. Congratulations on that. Let's talk more about that next time. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican of South Carolina. Sometimes the most effective surrogates, spokespeople, supporters can be former enemies or former rivals or whatever. I think it's amazing. And my best to your mother, Mrs. Mace.
She will love that, Greg. Thank you so much. God bless.
You bet. Take care now. We'll be right back.
I'm John Glasgow with your primary election update. Newsmax projecting President Biden will be the Democratic presidential nominee. Biden expected to win Georgia and Mississippi tonight. Trump still needs 130 delegates to win the Republican presidential nomination. That could happen tonight. Trump is leading in Mississippi, where 40 GOP delegates are on the line. President Biden running uncontested in that state, so he picks up the delegates there. Georgia, the biggest prize of the night. Trump leading that state, where 59 GOP delegates are at stake, so he could pick up some there as well. Washington State, Hawaii, they are on deck later this evening, and we will watch to see what happens there. But right now, let's go to senior correspondent John Huddy. He is live in Boca Raton with more on that.
Yeah, John, unsurprisingly, it's looking like Biden is clinching his party's nomination, Democratic nomination, and Trump is well on the way. You know, the question was whether or not Trump had the numbers mathematically, the remaining delegates to clinch the GOP nomination tonight. And as you were just talking about, and as we're seeing now from our Decision Desk headquarters, the numbers coming in, he's getting very close. So he's really on the cusp of getting the GOP nomination. We're also looking at some of the counties, the breakdown in Georgia, some of the counties while he's winning clearly by a pretty hefty margin. Nikki Haley also got a pretty big chunk in some counties like Chatham County, which is where Savannah is. Washington State, that's going to be interesting. That's a state that voted pretty heavily blue back in 2020, but we're going to see the breakdown there and whether people are shifting from Biden and whether Trump is going to pick up some more votes in Washington State, which, as you mentioned, is on deck. So we're keeping a close eye on that. President Biden did release, and his campaign released, a statement saying and warning in part about the threat, quote unquote, that Trump presents to democracy. That's really the narrative that the Biden campaign is going with. However, as we've been seeing, John, the issues central on voters' minds: immigration, the border crisis, economy, and crime.
Yeah, all major election issues that we should see come November in the general. Thank you so much, senior correspondent John Huddy. Appreciate it. Stick with Newsmax for more election coverage throughout the night.
Mar-a-Lago, one of the most exclusive spots in the entire universe, heavily guarded by federal agents. A perfectly, I believe, appropriate place to house classified documents, formerly classified documents, especially if you're a former president of the United States of America. Compare Mar-a-Lago to Joe Biden's garage. This is where Joe kept our nation's secrets that he was not authorized to bring home. Not authorized. Trump was, Biden wasn't. They turned to a guy named Robert Hur to investigate Biden after it became incredibly awkward. You're prosecuting President Trump for this, and Joe Biden has all this stuff around. He filed a report. I actually thought it was pretty good. I went through it earlier, and I went through it when it came out. But I may be in the minority on this one. I'd like to bring in the experts. Joe DeGeneva, former U.S. Attorney from Washington, D.C., of course, our Newsmax contributor, one of our favorites, and also Matt Whitaker, the former Acting Attorney General of the United States of America. Gentlemen, welcome. And on this one, I'll go to the former Attorney General. What do you think of this guy? Did he play by the rules? Am I wrong about him?
So I worked with Rob very closely when he was the principal deputy in the DAG's office, and I was his chief of staff. And what I can tell you is Rob is very much a DOJ man. He, was then U.S. Attorney in Maryland. What you saw today out of him is, he's unflappable. He's smart. I think his report, is is accurate, and that the transcript that was released right before he testified demonstrated that. I think the only challenge is just his judgment as a prosecutor. I mean, he didn't lay out a case that shouldn't be brought. I mean, ultimately, he made the decision instead of presenting it to a jury. And I mean, he can say it's a close call, but taking out of the citizens and leaving it in a prosecutor's hands, I think is very dangerous. But it did just demonstrate the two-tier system of justice between Trump and the way they're treating President Biden.
So if I could, I see a guy, I read the report, I think he's using discretion as opposed to a guy like Jack Smith. He says, look, he's the president of the United States. Yes, I think he's guilty, but a jury would not buy it. And it seemed logical to me. Joe DeGeneva, please, your thoughts.
Well, I think a jury would have bought it if it had been tried by a competent United States attorney. First of all, let's remember Jack Smith and Merrick Garland changed the rules. They decided they were going to indict a former president of the United States who had the right to these documents under the Presidential Records Act, et cetera, et cetera. What Hurd did was he put together a very good criminal case against a former United States senator who almost 50 years ago stole classified documents from a SCIF, a private citizen who used classified documents illegally and kept them improperly, and a vice president who did the same thing. Robert Hur's testimony today was very important because it showed exactly why his recommendation should have been that this case requires presentation to a grand jury after President Biden leaves office.
Well, it's just a recommendation. You called him, Matt, a DOJ man. And that actually, we all know now, is not a good thing. Tell us more what that connotes. I mean, no, they're still banking on people thinking that the government are the good guys, and too often they're not. Yeah. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Well, so I think Joe would agree with me. I mean, there's obviously, there is the doing justice part where you're not about winning cases, you're about doing justice and making the decisions so that, ordinary citizens have a respect for law. But then there's also those that reflexively believe the DOJ can do no wrong and that the Department of Justice and its lawyers are sort of above criticism. And I think Rob, in this case, again, he kept trying to make both sides happy with his decision. And obviously you're not going to do that in this context. And I think it just demonstrated that it's a close call. He used his discretion as a prosecutor. And I wish he would have explored that more as to how much discretion a prosecutor has to investigate cases, to bring cases. Because again, it points out just how Jack Smith has gone just over the top in his persecution of Donald Trump.
You see, I read this as a rebuke of Jack Smith. I also thought it was interesting that he put in there that Joe Biden himself was packing boxes alone when he was leaving the vice presidency. I mean, he put some dynamite stuff in that report. And quite frankly, the Judiciary Committee, other than Gates and Jordan, I don't know how many of them actually read the thing. I was a little bit disappointed by them. Final thoughts, Joe DeGeneva.
Well, I think that once you change the rules, which is what the Democrats did when they indicted Donald Trump, once that's your standard, that you can indict a former president, and you investigate the current president and you see the level of evidence, which is clearly, in my opinion, beyond a reasonable doubt. I can tell you this, I could convince a jury that President Biden was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of violating the espionage law. Just give me an opportunity. I just don't believe that, given that situation, there's only two alternatives here. You either dismiss the case against Donald Trump right now as Merrick Garland, or you wait until Joe Biden leaves office, you present the case to a grand jury, and you ask for an indictment.
Okay, but Hur did not make the appointment of Jack Smith. That's not her, right? That's not on Robert Hur, Matt Whitaker. I mean, the rules may have changed. The world's going crazy. That doesn't mean Robert Hur has to go crazy along with it. I don't know. I see this as one more thing. He said he could present himself as an elderly man with a poor memory. I think that word present himself, that Hur knows that this guy is devious, that that would be a strategy, just like it may have been a strategy during the deposition to, I don't remember. Granted, I haven't read the entire deposition. Final words, Matt Whitaker.
Well, again, this is a two-tiered system of justice. They either treat these two the same way under the similar facts, or we continue along with only Donald Trump is targeted by the Department of Justice for these types of crimes.
All right. Look, what's happening to Donald Trump is a total and complete crime. I know that. I don't know. I was impressed by the report. What can I tell you? Gentlemen, I appreciate it so much. Joe DeGeneva, Matt Whitaker, to be continued, and I'll be right back.
Do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing. It goes in and points out things that appeared in my garage, things that came out of my home, things that were moved not by me, but my staff.
Busted again. This is not true. Not true. It's one of the reasons why I'm okay with the Robert Hur report. Overall, it's not bad. He said, Hur said, and Hur says that what Joe Biden just said is not true. He testified today, right, before the Judiciary Committee. I know there was some grumbling from Democrats, of course, and also some from Republicans, but there are some gems in this report, and Jim Jordan was great, by the way, but I was really surprised this did not come up. So Joe leaves the vice presidency in January of 2017. You know, when you're the vice president, you get to live in a fancy house. It's called a Naval Observatory. Well, guess what? According to the report, Joe was observed packing documents, putting them into boxes, and then putting them on the moving truck. Mr. Biden was personally involved in the move. This is in the report. Next, please. One military aide recalled seeing him packing by himself and just him moving his stuff one at a time into the truck. Vice President of the United States is loading his own moving truck, but they're still pushing this thing about, oh, the staff. He did it. He did it. And his lawyers, I mean, are deceiving everybody.
He was saying staff was clearly involved, responsible for the packing. We don't see presidents and vice presidents during transitions packing boxes. But he recognizes now when he looks back on it, maybe more involvement on his part was necessary because it didn't go the way he thought it should have gone.
And they get away with it because they count on people, sometimes even our lawmakers, not reading the report, not reading the documents. Staffers, I don't know. Donald Trump did not pack his own boxes, and he didn't try to conceal anything. These are the boxes, by the way. These are the boxes in question. And they're obviously not disguising it because they're doing nothing wrong. I'll be right back. Newsmaxplus.com. Do yourself a favor, your family a favor, and get it. No risk. Start a free trial, okay? All Newsmax content you will have access to, and we've got some great material, and especially this show. Like, we end the show with a picture of, this time, my older child, Annalise. She's becoming quite the artist. Now, if only we could get her to finish the alphabet in order. I'll see you tomorrow.